Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us today, the 12th of April 2023. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, and here is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. We start from Namibia, and the presidency has dismissed reports that the country's Vice President Nangolo Mbumba was planning to retire. A local newspaper on Saturday quoted Mr. Mbumba as saying his days in government were numbered and that he was not planning to seek any other state job. Mr. Mbumba also urged the young people to take charge of their own affairs and those of the country. But the president's office said it would be strange for Mr. Mbumba to announce his retirement plans at a public meeting. According to a state-run NBC website, it said that Vice President serves as at the behest of the president. Mr. Mbumba, who is 81 years old, was first appointed to the position in 2018 following the resignation of Nikki Eyambo, who retired for medical reasons. In 2020 elections, President Hage Geingob retained Mr. Mbumba as his deputy. President Geingob is due to step down next year after serving 2 terms. He has named Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwah as the candidate of the ruling SWAPO party in the 2024 elections. We head over to Zimbabwe, and President Emmerson Mnangagwa has accepted an invitation to attend King Charles III coronation, which will take place on the 6th of May at Westminster Abbey in London. The UK ambassador in Zimbabwe met the president on Tuesday in the capital Harare to discuss about the coronation. Ambassador Melanie Robinson tweeted a picture of the meeting, in which they also talked about trade, investment projects and the importance of peaceful, free and fair elections. Later this year, the UK's relationship with Zimbabwe soared following land reforms implemented during the tenure of former long-time ruler Robert Mugabe in 2003. Zimbabwe pulled out of the Commonwealth, with Mr. Mugabe referring to it as an Anglo-Saxon unholy alliance against Zimbabwe when the group complained about the country's human rights record. Mr. Mugabe was overthrown in 2017, dying nearly 2 years later, and his successor, President Mnangagwa, has sought to improve relations with the country's critics. A Commonwealth delegation visited the country last year to consider the country's readmission, but the US and European Union both retained sanctions against companies and officials in Zimbabwe, including President Mnangagwa himself. Very well, and then we head over to Ethiopia, and the latest: at least 2 civilians who had sheltered in a displacement camp had been killed during clashes in Ethiopia's city of Debre Birhan as protests intensified in the country's Amara region. But protests broke out last week when Ethiopia's federal government announced a plan to dissolve Amara's regional special forces. Locals fear the move could leave the region undefended against attacks. The reforms are among stipulations of a peace deal between the federal government and former rebels from the Tigray People's Liberation Front (TPLF), signed last November to end the conflict. Residents had told media that Tuesday's clashes between federal security forces and the local militia in Debre Birhan, about 130 kilometers north of the capital Addis Ababa, lasted for hours. According to one resident, the 2 individuals killed had been sheltering in a camp in the city after fleeing ethnic-based violence in western Oromia region. Another resident said protesters raided a police building in the city, vowing to free people detained in connection with a massive anti-government rally on Sunday. There have been 8 different statements from federal and regional authorities since the protest began, in which they argue that the integration of the special forces into the national army or police will strengthen the country's security apparatus, but the protests have continued. Unrest was also reported in the Amara capital, Bahir Dar, on Tuesday. In the latest statement, the head of the ruling Prosperity Party's regional branch blamed the violence on failure to create awareness and said the government was ready to resolve any issues through dialogue. All right, and then we go to we head over to Sudan. Okay, and the United Nations says it is deeply concerned by a video of a man publicly calling for the killing of its representative in Sudan, Volker Perthes. In an outburst, the man accuses Mr. Perthes of interfering in the country's politics. The UN has urged the Sudanese authorities to investigate the incident. Sudan is in a political crisis after leaders this week failed to meet a deadline to form a civilian-led government. Differences between military factions have scuttled the ongoing reform talks. The recording, which has been circulating in social media, shows an elderly Sudanese man verbally abusing the UN official and then asking for a fatwa for him to be killed. The incident happened during a meeting held by Islamist parties linked to the ousted former leader Omar al-Bashir. In a statement, the organizers said the man's comments did not represent the views last year. Thousands of Islamist protesters called for the diplomat to leave Sudan, accusing him and the UN for meddling in the country's politics. Sudan has faced nearly weekly demonstrations since the army led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan seized power from a civilian government in October 2021. All right, now we head over to Nigeria, and the West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS has condemned the kidnapping of 80 people last week in northern Nigeria. Many of those abducted in Zamfara state were women and teenagers who had been collecting firewood. In a statement, ECOWAS called for the children's release. It is unclear who carried out the abductions. Many kidnappings, often for ransom by armed criminal gangs, have taken place in Zamfara. The incident is the latest in a wave of violent crime in Nigeria. Armed gangs killed more than 70 people in two separate attacks in the central state of Benue last week. On Friday, a camp for internally displaced people in the area of Magban was targeted by gunmen and dozens were killed. And a week ago, a number of residents were shot in the remote village of Omokibi. Some were decapitated. Okay. All right, let's head over to Chad now. And Chad's ambassador to Germany has been expelled in a retaliatory move by Berlin after the Central African nation kicked out the European nation's ambassador last week on Tuesday. Germany's foreign ministry said Chad's Mariam Ali Musa had to leave the country within 48 hours. German ambassador to Chad, Jean-Christian Gordon Crick, left the country last Saturday after the military government expelled him. Chad ordered Mr. Crick out of the country for what it said was his impolite attitude and lack of respect for diplomatic customs. A brief statement from the Chadian government gave no further details about the reason for his removal. He had been critical of the military-led government that has been in power since April 2021. The German authorities say Chad has not officially specified the exact reasons for the expulsion. And of course, General Muhammad Idris Deby Itno, who seized power following the death of his father, Idris Deby Itno, in 2021, is Chad's interim leader, and for what was intended to be an 18-month period that has since extended. Plans for a ballot last year were formally delayed in October, prompting public protests. Chad's military government now plans to hold presidential elections next year. Very well. Okay. Let's head over to Mali now. And the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged Mali's ruling junta to accelerate the pace of returning power to elected civilians by early 2024, as it has pledged to do. In a report to the Security Council, in his report, consulted by AFP News on Tuesday on the eve of a council meeting, Mr. Guterres is also concerned about the persistence of violence and its impact on the population, and the impasse in which an important peace agreement between the Malian state and the armed groups in the north is located. Mali has been plagued by the spread of jihadism and violence of all kinds since the outbreak of insurgency in the north in 2012. The violence has spread to the center of the country and into neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger. It is spreading southward. A UN stabilization mission, MINUSMA, has been deployed in Mali since 2013 with about 13,800 troops and police so far. The security turmoil goes hand in hand with a deep humanitarian and political crisis. Mali has been the scene of two Apaches since 2020 and is ruled by a junta. The junta has pledged under international pressure to step down by March 2024. In his quarterly report, Guterres notes progress on this path, such as the drafting of a constitution and the creation of an election management authority. But he added there has been a delay in the implementation of some key activities. With less than a year to go before the end of the transition, it is incumbent to the Malian authorities to do everything in their power to accelerate the process so that constitutional order is restored within the agreed time frame. That is what Guterres said. The junta has just announced the indefinite postponement of a referendum on the constitution. Let's head over back to Sudan. And the signatories of the deal set to organize a gradual transfer of power to civilians known as the Framework Agreement have missed yet again another deadline to advance towards a return to democracy. According to a timeline set up by the parties, a new prime minister and the institutions of the Transitional Authority should have been announced on Tuesday, April 11th, that is, yesterday. The deadline lapsed after the parties twice failed to sign a final transitional deal over disagreements on the integration of the paramilitary rapid support forces into the army. The point of contention between the two forces concerns the command and the control of the committee tasked with overseeing the reorganization. Yasir Aman, a member of the umbrella group of pro-democracy factions, wrote on Twitter on Wednesday, that is, sometimes back last week, neither the army nor the RSF responded to the Associated Press request for comment. Now, divisions between Sudan's deputy leader, who is the RSF commander, and the military chief and de facto head of Sudan raises fears of confrontations between the army and the RSF. In recent weeks, both forces have amassed troops and weapons in and around Sudan's capital, Khartoum. The army has greatly ramped up its presence in the city center, parking armored vehicles at nearly all junctions leading to the country's presidential palace. Beyond the generals, other challenges still remain. We go to Nigeria, and Nigeria's electoral body, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has asked an election court to dismiss challenges against the outcome of presidential elections held in February. Bola Tinubu of the ruling APC party was declared the winner with 37% of but his opponents, second place Atiku Abubakar and third place Peter Obi, have rejected the results and moved to Nigeria's highest appeal court. They want the election tribunal to nullify the results of the presidential race. In its defense, the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal, the Electoral Commission, described the petitions filed by the opposition candidates as grossly incompetent, vague and academic. It said they were an abuse of the court process. INEC has previously apologized for technical glitches that hindered the electronic transmission of results from polling stations. It said that any discrepancies between results on its website and its physical results will be investigated and resolved. The electoral process was criticized by observer groups as falling short of required standards. Very well, and then we end our bulletin from Tunisia, and police on Tuesday used tear gas to disperse homeless black sub-Saharan migrants who have been protesting outside the United Nations office to demand evacuation following incendiary comments by country's President Kais Saied. AFP journalists saw police breaking up the encampment outside the Tunis office of the global body, Refugees Agency, United Nations High Commission for Refugees. The migrants from sub-Saharan Africa have been protesting what they say is not safe for them to be in Tunisia. The UNHCR announced earlier this month that it will be suspending asylum activities worldwide as it moved to a new registration system. Migrants in Tunisia have held repeated protests outside the agency's office in the Lac district of the capital, including on Tuesday when they erected barricades in front of the UNHCR office there. Malian Famusa Koita, who is recognized by the UN as a legitimate asylum claimant, said many people have been waiting 2 to 3 years for the agency to settle their cases. Tunisia's Interior Ministry spokesperson Faika Bouzgaya said the country's police intervened at the request of the UNHCR, and 80 migrants have been detained. Hundreds of migrants have been living outside the nearby office of the International Organization for Migration without access to toilets or running water, since Said claimed without evidence in February that migrants from sub-Saharan Africa were causing crime and represented a plot to change Tunisia's democratic makeup. Okay? Yes, indeed. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. So you are now up to date. I'll just scoot over that news item. And, well, INEC has gone to court in Nigeria to challenge the petition that was filed by Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, and two others, claiming, I think I took us through that petition here, and to be honest with you, I think there could be other issues that these petitioners would have included in that petition that maybe could hold water. But none of what really they presented, to me, according to what I read, and I'm not a lawyer, so there's a possibility I'm absolutely wrong on this, but it didn't hold enough ground to suspend these results, because there are things that were apparent, that even INEC has come out to apologize for the technical glitches that hindered the electronic transmission of results from polling stations that was widespread. And there are possibilities that this could have compromised the credibility of that election. But that was not even part of the electronic failure, and all that was not even part of that petition. So I don't know how this is going to take place. But INEC went to court to challenge this case. This case, it has not been heard yet. And they're saying that the petition, what did they say? All right, so in its defense, the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal, the Electoral Commission, described the petitions filed by the opposition candidates as grossly incompetent, vague, and academic. I don't know if grossly incompetent. Who is grossly incompetent? The petition that was filed, or INEC was grossly incompetent in its work? But it says INEC, which was responding, I think, to this tribunal that is hearing this petition, and it said the petitioners who filed this petition and the petition itself is grossly incompetent. I don't know if grossly incompetent is, specifically is even a word that fits within whatever it is that maybe they're trying to imply. And also they said it's very vague and academic. I don't know about academic, but vague, some good parts of it is not very clear. It's not very clear. And the prayers that they were asking, were they for about 5 or 4 prayers that are contained in that petition? It's neither here nor there. So it does not hold water. It's not a very, very strong case. If the thing that was at the center of this petition and was at the center of problems in the electoral process, which was the beavers, the electoral system, and that did not form part of that petition. So I immediately saw there was a problem there. So the hearing of that case, I guess, is continuing, and I shall be keeping us up to date with what is happening there. Okay, now the issue of Sudan. Did I not tell you? Did I not tell you? This was not going to happen. The army will not agree to the moving forward of the country. And now what I find to be quite interesting, although I think this is, and I've said it here before, I don't want to sound like a broken record, because I think we keep repeating these things and we see them from even before they happen. But I don't know how people sit and think that these characters are actually committed to even realizing and implementing some of these things that they say they want to do, because you can clearly see from their part they're not really committed. You can see the army, you can see is not committed to the transition. And now what should worry Sudan is this division in the army. Now, if you have a divided army, then what you have is a country like South Sudan. When you have a divided army, then you're creating a bigger problem. And the more this military junta continues staying in power, the more problems they're creating for Sudan, for right now and for the future. And Sudan might slip into the abyss in depth that it might not be able to recover back again. And that is the danger that lies in this, what we are seeing now, these wrangles and this division in the National Army of Sudan. So what has been contentious, because they were supposed to, they initially were to sign the deal in the 1st of April, and I said it will not happen, and they said, okay, you know what, we have pushed it to the 11th, and I also, the last we were talking about this, I said, I don't see this happening at all. And yes, 11th was yesterday, on Tuesday. That did not happen, and that is because of the division between the Sudan's deputy leader, who is the head of RSF, who wants these people. Now, RSF, for you, easy of understanding, these are the Janjaweed. Okay, these are the Janjaweed. Right now, they are called the Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan, and the leader of this Rapid Support Forces is the second in command in the military. And so they are having already a problem, because he wants these men to be integrated, this paramilitary group to be integrated back into the military, and these ways and modalities, they're not agreeing. And I think the military also is not very keen on having this paramilitary group being integrated into the military. I think there's a problem in so many fronts, and this now portends a bigger problem and instability for Sudan if it's not handled carefully, and if it's not addressed and arrested in good time. Then what you're seeing here is a sitting time bomb. As any time this thing could go off, and they should worry. This should worry IGAD. I don't know why IGAD is not coming in and engaging at this point, or we're waiting to see this army should start shooting amongst themselves for us to have now African Union issuing statements. You do have, listen, they do have these offices, what are they called? For what is it? There's a proper security term for it, where you see a problem, or you, there's a right word for it. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but there is that. We do have that in African Union and in IGAD, like where you already sense there's a problem. So you set up a mechanism to try to address that problem before it gets out of proportion. Pre-warnings, is it? Pre-warnings or something like that. There's a proper name for it. So African Union, this could be a great time for you to use that office under Peace and Security. Is it Peace and Security Council? Yeah, and have some of your people go to Sudan and see what really is going on, so that you avert what this portends, which this looks like a full-blown war if it will not be brought under control very soon. So that is where you need to come in, IGAD. That is how, when, and how you need to come in right now. I know Sudan has been suspended from African Union, so maybe that's why African Union is reluctant, because of Sudan's being led by a military person. But we could have bodies like IGAD come in. I don't know about the Arab, is it not the Arab League, but the Islamic, is it the Muslim League or something like that? I don't know, because them, they all, I can't trust them over what is happening in Sudan. I don't know. There's some bodies which I think they only add fuel to the fire. But I think a body like IGAD could be a good fit to come in and try and address whatever it is that is going on right now in Sudan before things get out of hand. The military is not agreeing, so the deadline was passed yesterday. We don't know when the new deadline they've set up, and even if they set it up, the military is not willing to leave power. And the second in command, who is the head of RSF, as much as one of the key things he wants RSF to be integrated to the army, which personally I think it's a bad idea because of the ideological differences. This is a paramilitary group, and the military is the military, though sometimes those lines are quite thinly veiled because of how they were operating even under the former President Omar al-Bashir, Janjaweed. Remember, they were accused of being the people that were being used in what happened in Darfur. So they were still working with the government. So, so what is the big deal now? Why can't you just absorb them? Why can't you just have them? And and in a lot of quarters, they've been referred to as mercenaries for hire, because they're the ones who are being used even in Yemen and other places. So what they stand for and what they're known to do, I think is quite different from the ideology of the army in Sudan. So even for myself, and I'm not even a security expert, I just see it as a bad idea. Nevertheless, these are people that you've worked with. These are people that have been part of the leadership of Sudan. So you must find a way of addressing this issue, of seeing how do you integrate them and what roles can they play, so that you're able to solve this problem. Because the more you keep drawing it, the more you keep taking it in circles, the more you keep having this thing, foment, then you are creating more problems, and that will not be good for Sudan, and definitely it will not be good for this region. We have enough turmoil and we have enough instability, and if Sudan gets into it right now, I think that would be too much. That would be too much. That would be too much. So I think that I strongly think that IGAD should get a hold of this matter and see how they can intervene and try to help out whichever way they can, so that maybe even mediate and see how can they help them work through it, because African Union clearly cannot, because Sudan has been suspended. But I still think that if African Union wanted to come in and help and get some mediation going, it could, because at the end of the day, if things don't work out and a war ensues, then African Union, you'll be forced to get some money, go feed refugees, go take care of that in the UN. So before it gets into that, can you help address it now? Early warning, yes, that office of early warning, something, something like that. So we need that is where they should come in. Okay, now there's so much here, but I will not get into the details. Okay, the Zimbabwean story. Very quickly, President Mnangagwa has agreed to has accepted an invitation to attend King Charles III's coronation, which will take place on the 6th of May at Westminster Abbey in London. The UK ambassador in Zimbabwe met the president on Tuesday in the capital, Harare, to discuss about the coronation. And of course, after the meeting, they had to pose for a photo, and she was just happy to post it on her socials. Ambassador Melanie Robinson tweeted a picture of the meeting, in which they also talked about trade, investment, projects, and the importance of peaceful, free, and fair elections this year. I will forget everything else she said before peaceful elections, because I think their main focus right now is on Zimbabwe's election, okay? That is what they're looking to see and what is happening, because I think they're looking out to see what else is Zimbabwe's government doing and where do they need to pick another problem and add it to the already existing list of things they feel Zimbabwe is not doing well. And elections is just one of those things, because there has been some instances where the opposition has been targeted. There has been some instances where human rights abuses have been recorded around the election period, and so this is a time they're looking to see how Zimbabwe's government is handling this, especially on President Mnangagwa's part. So he is accepting and he is going. And Ms. Robinson tweeted, the president has been invited and has accepted the invitation and will be traveling to London for that. Okay, I don't know how I feel about that. And mostly because of UK's role. I know we can't really see it in the past for a long time. Sometimes you have to move on and, forgive and all that. But you can see UK is the one that started the rolling of this stone now that went gathering all this storm on its way to what brought Zimbabwe to where it is today. The UK did that. When Zimbabwe went ahead with its land reforms, and before that there was a prior agreement and there's a part that the UK government was meant to be playing in terms of helping with this, and it refused to meet its part of the bargain, setting up Zimbabwe for where it is today. I do agree, perhaps even the measures that were taken by the then President Robert Mugabe might have been extreme to some extent. But still, there could have been a better way that would have been handled, because Zimbabweans have a right to claim what is rightfully theirs. Well, let's just start from that point, and then we can look at other things. The black Zimbabweans have a right to claim back their ancestral lands, So when you start from that point, and now you work your way through and see how did these pieces of huge lands get into the hands of X, Y, and Z. And now since this happened many years ago, and some of the people who were perhaps holding these lands were not even born at that point. So now how can we, and others were born in Zimbabwe and now they're Zimbabweans and all that, but how can we now solve this problem in a way that is not divisive, that part of the people who feel they've been treated unfairly and their right was taken to them unfairly, they are able to get the restitution, but the people also who are claiming ownership of this land are also treated fairly. So I think that lacked in that process, but that is because of how also the West handled this matter. So UK was paramount to the crippling of Zimbabwe. Was paramount to the crippling of Zimbabwe. And I do understand President Mnangagwa's position, and even accepting to visit, to go and attend this coronation, which is okay. I think we are living in a more interdependent world, and so it's very difficult to isolate yourself on certain things. But I still have I still feel a certain way, I think, in relation to Zimbabwe and its relation to the UK. So it will change anything, but I can see the efforts that President Mnangagwa is trying to help and to make in terms of just trying to build up these relations that might have been messed up during President Robert Mugabe's time, and just trying to mend ways and build new diplomatic ties. But you can see sometimes he tries so hard. You could literally see him on the floor crawling and trying to beg on these people. And these people don't even care. So sometimes it's upsetting. He overextends himself. That's what I think. Literally begging to go back to Commonwealth. For what? Really? For what? So I don't know. It's good that he's going, and it will be nice if he's part of, Zimbabwe's back to Commonwealth and all that. But sometimes I think we overextend ourselves too much. We overextend ourselves too much. There's something called dignity. And if our leaders in this continent can embrace that sometimes, you'll know where to draw the line. It's not a tit for tat. It's not that. But even in diplomatic relations, there has to be some level of respect, some mutual respect. But we don't get that. So I think this will be another time that we will see our leaders being bundled in buses again. I think this will happen. I want to see if my President William Ruto, I think he's been invited, I don't know. And I want to see if they'll allow his motorcade to leave the airport straight to where this will be happening. Is it in Westminster Abbey? Yeah, I'd like to see, because I know Joe Biden will have his beast carry him all the way, and maybe Emmanuel Macron will also have that. I'd like to see if my president will also be allowed to have that dignity as a head of state, to get into his official car and be driven to Westminster Abbey, or our heads of state from Africa and other countries from the global south will be bundled in a bus, and then we'll see them taking selfies and sharing with us, heading to this coronation, I tell you. Anyway, I think I'll just leave that here. The rest we will talk about in the morning, God willing. I want to thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.